فأنا بقول فقط التالي: لمن نحن نكون أمام العمل الجامع الذي يحاول أن يحيط بكل التيارات الفكرية التي مرت في الزمن الذي يدرسه، لابد للباحث أن يختار كما قلت. مهما كان الإنسان لا يعطيه يجد فيه بعض المآخذ، حتى لو كانت هذه المآخذ مثلا مآخذ في الترجمة إلى اللغة العربية. بعض هذه المآخذ التي قالها زميلنا هي جاي من الفوضى في اللغة العربية، وبعض حتى الأشياء التي قالها أنا رأيتها عند أساتذة كبار بمصر. يمكن المترجم هنا أخذ عما شافهم كبار بمصر وسبقوه إلى وضع هذه الكلمات، فلن أتوقف عند هذا. لكن أقل من ذلك أقول بأنه أهم ما هنالك، أهم من هذا كله، هو أن قراءة هذا الكتاب تشكل متعة حقيقية. طبعا أنا قرأته في نصه الإنجليزي، ما كنتش أعرف أنه يعني ما حاولت أن حاولت أن أحصل على النسخة لم أجدها، لكن قرأت الترجمة الإنجليزية التي تؤكد مرة جديدة أن الفلسفة لا تقوم على لغة معقدة ولا مفاهيم لا سبيل لحل رموزها وتأويلها. يعني الفكرة المسبقة عن الفلسفة أن هي كذلك، بل هي ولا هي حكر على أقلية أو نخبة ثقافية، بل هي خطاب موجه إلى كل الناس. أنا كما قلت أن كل المحاولات لضرب الفلسفة خابت، وهي تختص بالناس باهتماماتهم الكبرى في البيئة. البيئة شدد عليها لأول مرة، وعلاقتهم مع الطبيعة والعيش معا وطلب السعادة والتواصل. فقد جعل هذا الكتاب الفلسفة في متناول الجميع، لأنه عرضها بطريقة في غاية الوضوح بسهولة. يعني لم يخن الفلسفة، بالعكس شدد على طريقة واضحة جدا، لم تخلو عن عمق الموضوع وغناه، بل كانت في الواقع قمة الإبداع. وآمل أن يستفيد منه العدد الأكبر من طلبتنا والمهتمين بالشأن العام. وشكرا من الأعماق لمؤلفي هذا الكتاب الجسر الجديد بين النرويج ولبنان، ومن ورائه كل الناطقين بالعربية. وشكرا لكم جميعا لأنكم قبلتم أن تأتوا إلى حفلتنا. والفلسفة لا تحظى، لكن أنتم تؤكدون أن الفلسفة لابد منها.
شكرا دكتور زيناتي. بس إذا ممكن خلينا قبل ما بدي استأذن منك ناخذ الرد تبع دكتور شيرباك، إذا عنده أي تعليق على دكتور زيناتي. شو حابب تقول دكتور شيرباك؟ تفضل.
Okay, thank you again. I really appreciate this discussion and the points that you bring out. First, a general point. This is history where you suppose that everybody should be interested somehow or getting interested in it. If you have one student who is interested in something special, you will plunge into that, if it is Heidegger or Sartre or Spinoza, and you could work it out with that individual students. But here you have something, it's inside a frame where you are supposed to present it for everybody, and you have to make it relevant to a large audience, which is another approach. I didn't get into philosophy by reading those books. I started as a very young person. I studied medicine at the time, and I read Camus and Dostoevsky and Sartre and other people, and I got into it through existentialism in a mixture between existentialism and literature. That was how I got into it. So there are various ways of getting into philosophy, personally, and also as a teacher of few or one person or fewer who are interested. But if you have a mass educational system, as in this case, you have to take another approach, and that's the approach that I have tried to work out in this book. Then I think it's an interesting question whether it is Western or not. First of all, I would recall to some of you, look at the map. Eastern part of Norway is as far east as Cairo. I mean, and if you are in China, the state of the middle, then we are all Westerners. And as a matter of fact, the three monotheistic religions coming from this area, not from up north where I come from, they have basically the same, should we say, structure, one God creating everything, giving laws, condemning us at the end. Then you have the problem of evil. And sacred scriptures, and then you have the problem of interpretation, and you have the need to argue for your interpretation, which means that all the three monotheistic religions are actually structured along the same lines. Sure, in religion there are various aspects that have nothing to do with the rationality, I would say. Ritual, emotional, singing, what have you, tradition. But in the three monotheistic religions, there are validity claims. If they hadn't the claim of one God, they couldn't be monotheistic. And if this God wasn't good, it couldn't be a God but something else. And so on and so forth. And if the scriptures weren't to be interpreted, I mean, then you have the question of interpretation. So even if you look from whatever perspective you look upon it, I think it is no accident. It's something, nothing you add to it when you say that the Arabic was, there were three languages as you mentioned. It was Greek, Latin, and Arabic. And there were the three monotheistic religions, and they were part of the same puzzle. But then I would also recall to you living here in the center of the civilization, in Lebanon, old Phoenician culture, whereas we lived outside the whole thing. First we had the Greek, 500 years before Christ, and then we had the Hellenistic and Roman culture 500 years before Muhammad. So, I mean, here we should also look at the historical roots. They are far before the religious parts which we see today. So there is a long history, and you took part in it. We didn't. We came as latecomers into the whole thing, we up in the north. So much about the West and the rest, I think. And let me add, what is the West? I've been working with Chinese a lot, and they talk about the West. But for heaven's sake, do you mean the United States, or you mean Europe? Do you mean Northern Europe, or Southern Europe, Eastern Europe, or Western Europe, or what do you think about? I mean, there are pluralities within the Arabic world. There are pluralities in Europe, and the Arabic world is to a large extent essentially part of the Western world. I mean, there are greater differences when you go to India and to Chinese philosophy. They have quite another structure. So that's no accident, and it has been an important thing just to add and to stress that part of the common heritage. But then I would say something about the stress which both of you put on thinkers like Heidegger, Derrida, Foucault, etc. I started there, and I am working there. But I must also say, when I see a lot of, how do you say, halfly students who haven't done it thoroughly, and to start to read those very difficult philosophers, I'm not happy with what I see as a result. I think there is very much nonsense coming out of bad reading of great philosophers, especially the very difficult ones like Derrida, Foucault, Deleuze, a lot of those thinkers. I do think that there is a need for the kind of, should we say, intellectual clarity and argumentative virtues that you find in analytic philosophy. It can go astray there too, be too much analytic thinking and too little substance. That's true. But one has to trade with both, I think. That's part of the situation today. So one has, I think, for the introductory course, to be careful in one has to present the background and the history and give the people the tools by which they can figure out more of the good and bad things in modern philosophy. For instance, Heidegger. I wrote my thesis on Heidegger, the first one. And sure, I mean, he is pretty naive when it comes to social and political issues. That's where Hannah Arendt is adding to him. He's too deep in a way. He's so deep that the political social word disappears, you could say. And also, I would say, his attempt to overcome discursive rationality, that is, argumentative rationality, I think he has some points, but I think he overlooks how we in the modern world are in a plurality of positions, in the various sciences, humanities, theology, what have you. And we have to listen to each other and be humble, because we do not know the